When people get older, your eyes get blurry easily. If you don't believe me, look at this old man who just put a log on the ground. In just a blink of an eye, the wood has moved on its own. He doesn't believe his eyes. He approached carefully. He didn't expect the wood to come up to him. Scared, the old man almost died on the spot. At that moment, the old man's carpenter friend arrived. The old man offered to give him the wood on the spot. Lonely and isolated, the old carpenter carved the wood into a puppet. He stroked his work with satisfaction. But when he touched the puppet's chest, he felt a hint of something wrong. Oh my God, there was a heart in the wood. At first the carpenter was a little frightened, but in a few moments he was delighted. He carved out the eyes and limbs for the puppet. Then he looked at him with fascination. The words "Daddy." The old carpenter, who had been single all his life, was overwhelmed. He rushed out of the room to be a father, thanking God for the gift he had been given. He took the only sheet he had and made clothes for his son, and gave him a beautiful name, Pinocchio. Looking at himself in the mirror, Pinocchio began to accept this strange world. It wasn't long before he learned to walk, but at the same time, he became more and more rebellious. One day, Pinocchio met a talking cricket spirit, and the cricket told him in a very serious way that a disobedient child can't live a good life, and that he must change his wooden head with knowledge. Pinocchio doesn't listen to him. In his desperation, he even took a wooden mallet and hit the innocent cricket with it. But the next thing he knew, he was paying the price for his actions. Soon afterwards, the old carpenter came home to find the door unlocked. A knock at the door woke Pinocchio. He rushed up to answer the door, only to find his legs burnt out. Little did Pinocchio know as he warmed himself by the fire, that his body could burn. His anxious father jumps in the window, furious at Pinocchio's behavior. But looking at his son's pouting face, the old father's heart melts. In the end, he made Pinocchio a new pair of legs, and made a bold decision to send Pinocchio to school. In those days, it was a question of whether he would get enough to eat. But in order to give his son a good education, the old carpenter was willing to give up his winter coat in exchange for his son's school books. He proudly told others. He bragged to others that his son was going to school. But no sooner had he left, Pinocchio snuck out of the school. Ever seen such a naughty boy? His father gave him a cotton shirt in exchange for textbooks for school, but he sold them on the spot, in exchange for a cheap ticket to the circus. The owner saw this puppet that moved without strings. He was immediately arrested. Meanwhile, the old carpenter comes to pick up his son from school. The teacher told him he hadn't seen his son at all. Anxious, the carpenter searched everywhere. From his neighbors he learns Pinocchio had been taken by the circus, and that the circus had moved out of town. At night, the circus owner decided the bonfire wasn't big enough, so he arranged for his men to burn Pinocchio down. Pinocchio cried and begged the boss for mercy. He said he couldn't leave his father behind. To his surprise, this filial piety touched the boss. The boss not only agreed to let him go, he even gave him 5 gold coins for his journey. On the way home, Pinocchio asked 2 men who were fishing for directions. The men didn't want to talk to him, but when they heard he had 5 gold coins in his hand, he came up to them with enthusiasm. And when he looked closer, he realized that one was a vixen, and one was a cat spirit. The fox told Pinocchio they knew of a magical place. If you plant the gold coins, and a money tree will grow. 1 gold coin can grow 500. How many is 5 gold coins? Yes, that's a lot anyway. It seems the fox is not very intelligent either, and yet Pinocchio believed him. First they filled their bellies with Pinocchio's gold coins, and then they sneak away while Pinocchio sleeps. The simple Pinocchio had to go alone to the place the fox had told him about. On the way he meets Cricket again. The Cricket kindly offered advice. He told him to take the rest of his gold coins and hurry home, but the greedy Pinocchio didn't heed his advice. He continued on his way. The result was predictable. The cat and vixen dressed as robbers not only took all his gold coins, they knocked him out and hung him from a tree. The next day, a mouse spirit dressed in fancy clothes rescued Pinocchio, and took him to a little fairy. The fairy had the owl doctor give him a full examination, but luckily he was alright. It's a disease that all puppets should have. The fairy cured Pinocchio of his illness with a glass of blue juice. Afterwards he was asked why he was hanging from a tree. Pinocchio started to lie. But what he didn't expect was, as he lied more and more, his nose grew longer and longer, and finally it turned straight into a wooden stick. The fairy had to call for his woodpecker friend, and pecked Pinocchio's nose back to its original shape. Happy times are always short. To get home to his father, Pinocchio had to say goodbye to the fairies. He had to say goodbye to the fairies. He finally made it home, but his father was not at home. The neighbors told him his father had gone to the other side of the sea to find him. So Pinocchio set out on another journey to find his father. He tried to swim there, but the sea washed him mercilessly to the shore. A mysterious man appeared, and carried him back to the castle. Pinocchio woke up and recognized his Aunt Snail. When he turned around, and was surprised to find that the little fairy had grown into a big fairy. Pinocchio wanted to grow up too, But the fairy told him that puppets don't grow up. To grow up, he must first become human. And to become human, he must learn. The fairy sent Pinocchio to school. But not only did he not study properly, he played tricks on the teacher with the other students. He was out of the classroom in less than half a day. He even learned to steal things. And that day, Pinocchio had skipped class again. He followed his classmates in a donkey cart to a mysterious castle, where they could play with impunity, without fear of being discovered by parents or teachers. Pinocchio was having a great time. And soon, and left the search for his father behind him. But as the saying goes, one side of heaven, and one side of hell. The next day, Pinocchio noticed something was wrong, and they all had donkey ears. And then, their limbs began to change, and their cries for help turned into donkey calls, as a creepy old man pushed in the door. Pinocchio and his little friends were transformed into donkeys. The old man sold Pinocchio to a circus owner. In the circus, Pinocchio is forced to perform a fire drill, but because of a mistake, he falls hard to the ground, and the fairy saw it all. They look at each other, one with disappointment in his eyes, the other with regret in his eyes. As a result of messing up the show, the boss decided to drown Pinocchio in a fit of rage. A naughty child's playfulness turned into a donkey and marched into a circus, abandoned by his owner for a botched performance, with a boulder falling into the sea, and Pinocchio sank to the bottom of the sea. He struggled for a few moments and then he didn't move again, and that's when there was a miraculous sight. A million little fish surrounded him, and in a few moments, Pinocchio, who had become a puppet again, emerged from the water. He tried to swim to the other side of the sea to find his father. Suddenly, a giant whale appeared in the water. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed Pinocchio. In the whale's belly, Pinocchio met a tuna. The tuna told him that if he came here, he would be digested. And that's when a light not far away caught Pinocchio's eye. He slowly moved closer to it, and was surprised to find the father he'd been searching for was there. Father and son, who hadn't seen each other for so long, cried together. And it turned out, his father was on his way to find Pinocchio. He was swallowed by a whale along with his boat. It was here he learned to fish. He survived by eating the small fish in the whale's belly. He even made a bed here. The father wanted to live here with his son forever. But Pinocchio, who had been through many trials and tribulations, was unusually. He said to his father with great determination, they had to get out. He dragged his father to the whale's mouth. Claiming that the whale was snoring, he jumped into the water. The tuna escaped with him. The father, who could not swim, thus managed to escape to the shore with the help of his son and the tuna. Pinocchio thanked the tuna, but the tuna said it was Pinocchio's courage that had saved him. After saying goodbye to the tuna, Pinocchio and his father took up residence in a dilapidated house, and because of the long journey, his old father was tired and worn out. To look after him, Pinocchio hauled water for the others during the day, in exchange for milk for his father to drink. At night, he took out his textbooks and studied hard. His father was slowly recovering. He looked at his son, who was so much more understanding. His eyes were filled with relief. That's right, the rebellious boy he once was long gone. Now Pinocchio just wants to be human, and take care of his father. But he's just a puppet after all. His skin is cracked by the sun and wind, and every now and then, his father, with loving eyes, would fill it with glue. And finally, Pinocchio's actions touched the fairy, and the fairies forgave him for all the trouble he had done, and Pinocchio closed his eyes, and fell into a deep sleep. And when he woke up again, he was a human boy of flesh and blood. He called out to his father with great emotion.
Pinocchio! Pinocchio!